Well, ka nui te mihi kia koutou, kia ora, good morning everyone. It's so good to see you all. Can I just say a big thank you to Fran and also to Simon for inviting me here again 1 year on from when we last caught up. It's also good to see our fantastic Trade Minister Todd McClay in the house. It's good to have you in country, my friend, and appreciate everything that you're doing. I'm not sure whether he's actually got tax status in New Zealand anymore. I think he's away for over 180 days. And I also saw Damien O'Connor here as well. Can I say thank you, Damien, for being here? It's good to see you too. And can I also acknowledge some of the great stalwarts of this really important relationship to us, the New Zealand-US relationship. David Gerenbeck, can I say thank you for your superb leadership at the US Embassy and the work that you do day in, day out. I also want to acknowledge Rosemary Banks. She's been an absolute legend in this relationship and shepherding us through a change of administration. And I want to say, Rosemary, thank you for your service to the country and to Foreign Affairs and to this special relationship. And it's great that we've got Chris Seed heading up there. He's so keen to get there. He's leaving on the 1st of January. As soon as he's got the title, he's away. And we had a good catch up yesterday talking about where we'd like the relationship to go with him as well. And can I just acknowledge Jonathan Mason, Chair of the New Zealand-US Council, and also Mike Hearn from AmCham, both big champions and have been long-term champions, actually, of this relationship between the two countries for some time. And just to extend a very warm welcome to all of you as the business leaders here today. I know how incredibly hard you all work each and every day to do the work of growing your companies, but also to grow our economy. And in doing that, you're creating jobs and actually creating a more prosperous New Zealand. Look, I think many of you will know that I lived in North America for 8 years, and this New Zealand-US partnership is one that I'm exceptionally enthusiastic about. The US is the most consequential of economies. It is a driving force for global innovation and dynamism. It's a country whose actions, I think, matter like no other, whether you're in Europe or whether you're in the Middle East, or for us right here in the Indo-Pacific region. And the US is a country that New Zealanders are fortunate to be bound to by ties of history and having from visited and from studied and having worked together. And I just wanted to make some very quick reframing or framing remarks really about the importance of the relationship between New Zealand and the US, commenting first on the work my government has done with the new Trump administration before moving on to talk about the work that we do together in the Indo-Pacific. And then I'll round that out by focusing on the trading relationship before I move across and get interrogated by Fran. Look, since I last spoke to you a year ago, President Trump has again come to office and he's made great strides in implementing his agenda. When I spoke to him as President-elect back in November last year, he outlined, I think, a very genuine commitment to peace. He started to deliver on that promise with the deal that his administration brokered just 6 weeks ago in the Middle East, a rather historic turning point to a rather intractable conflict. And he remains very focused in pursuit of peace in the Ukraine as well. At home, the President's quest to drive economic growth has seen him delivering on his promise to cut taxes and to deregulate the economy. And he's even kept his promises on policies which I am less enamoured with, like imposing tariffs, which we'll have a little bit to say about later. My government too has been delivering, I think, on its promises. When I spoke to you last year, I committed to investing and building the relationship with the incoming administration so that we have a solid foundation for the work that we need to do together to build out security and prosperity across the region. We've made, I think, great strides in building out those connections, whether it's the many meetings that Winston's had with Marco Rubio, or Judith's work with Pete Hegseth, or Todd's work with Jamison Greer, or my engagements with President Trump. I think that's the four of us that have been working really hard to make sure we've got deep and broad relationships with this administration. When my government came to office, we immediately went to work on putting in place an upgrade to the capabilities of the New Zealand Defence Force. And in a rapidly sort of deteriorating geostrategic environment, I think it's in New Zealand's interest to build and sustain a defence force that can respond to a range of contingencies, whether that's disasters here at home, whether it's troubles across the Southwest Pacific, or whether it's higher-end demands further afield. And so this year, Judith Collins has delivered our Defence Capability Plan. That will see a doubling in our spending on defence. And those investments will ensure that the NZDF is combat capable, certainly with increased lethal strike capabilities to deter actions counter to our interests. And already we've announced that we will invest more than $2 billion in Seahawk helicopters, bought from, of course, America's Lockheed Martin. And beyond that, there will be opportunities also for Kiwi businesses too. A new emphasis on innovation promises, I think, to unlock technologies for the NZDF, such as uncrewed vehicles and new space technologies, areas where Kiwi companies are actually already trailblazing. And so as a small state wanting to have an outsized impact in the world, we rely on partnerships. And that's why it's absolutely vital the NZDF becomes increasingly interoperable with Australia and with other partners, including the US. So the Defence Capability Plan will enhance that interoperability because it's by cooperating together that our countries help create the stability and the security, the foundational security that's necessary for the region to flourish. It's also how we get to leverage scale and actually, frankly, avoid inflation in the global defence industry when spends are increasing across the world. The partnership between our two countries extends to the full part we want the US to play in the future of the Indo-Pacific, and that is the engine room of the 21st century. So it actually was really good to see the commitment that President Trump made recently in spending time in our part of the world last month, whether it was at ASEAN engaging in Kuala Lumpur or certainly with APEC through his visits through Japan and Korea as well. Yeah, I was pleased to meet with him one-on-one and also get to sit down with him with a couple of leaders over dinner to exchange views with him and others about what was happening across our region. And whether it's been about de-escalating tensions between Thailand and Cambodia, denuclearised North Korea, or the importance of stability in the Taiwan Strait, it was good to see the President eager to listen and work with partners to promote a much more prosperous and peaceful region as a result. In a similar vein, Winston Peters has been very effective, I think, at ensuring that Marco Rubio and his State Department is adequately briefed on what's happening in our Pacific Islands region, whether that's ensuring that tuna treaty funding flows through or finding new ways to partner in the region together. And we will keep the close US-New Zealand security partnership going in many other areas as well, areas in which we benefit disproportionately, whether it's in the work that we do together sharing intelligence or busting organised criminal gangs that prey on our communities. With the US accounting for a quarter of global GDP, the American economy is an absolutely essential enabler of New Zealand's economic prosperity going forward. The American market is critical for Kiwi exporters with its size, its purchasing power, and its demand for premium goods and services. As the practitioners of this economic relationship, the business leaders that hustle and I think innovate every day to contribute to our respective countries' prosperity, you all know incredibly well what this energised and high-performing trading relationship looks like. At $8 billion, the US remains New Zealand's largest market for New Zealand service exporters. And my government promised to double exports, that's the work that Todd's leading, and so with our goods exports to the US growing by more than 8% in the year to September is a pretty good outcome. In spite of a 15% tariff, I think it's a good contributor to our global trade growth agenda. In fact, I believe our great Kiwi exporters are successfully trading into the US over the tariff because we produce premium food and services that American consumers demand irrespective of price. Our agri-tech innovators continue to sell into America because they actually produce world-beating products that American ranchers and farmers actually want to get their hands on. And so despite the tariffs, we are determined to continue working with Kiwi exporters as they grow established market segments in the US market. And it was a welcome relief when last month the US rolled back the so-called reciprocal tariffs on beef and kiwi fruit. That is just good news for Kiwi farmers and growers. It represents over $2 billion in exports, or about 30% of our total US trade. And that's great news also, I think, for American consumers. The US market is one of the most valuable for our most exciting exporters, the innovators carving out new niches in sectors like digital and high-tech and space industries. Outstanding success stories like Rocket Lab show companies in these segments succeed best when they're able to partner with American venture capital, American innovation and ideas. And with about a third of applications for the Active Investor Visa Plus Visa program, which we reset in April 1 this year, coming from the US, I see a future in which we'll only see even more opportunity for American capital to partner with Kiwi ingenuity going forward. Now, the fact our exporters are succeeding in the real world doesn't mean the government has forgotten about tariffs. Todd continues to make the case regularly for lower tariffs on New Zealand firms. And we are a country that relishes the gains from trade, US manufactured aircraft connect obviously our islands to each other and to the world, and it's hard certainly to log onto a laptop without being reminded how much US tech entrepreneurship is responsible for the innovations that power up our everyday life. So the Trump administration's concerns that its exporters are treated unfairly, I think, are misplaced. At least insofar as New Zealand is concerned. We are a country that applies an average tariff of just 0.3% on American goods. And little wonder then that US exports to New Zealand have increased by 2/3 again in just the past 4 years. So the Trump administration gets our argument. They recognise that we have a balanced and complementary trading relationship. Indeed, they so often tell us that they think of us as one of the good guys. But at the same time, we are incredibly realistic and expect tariffs to persist as a feature of US trade policy going forward. President Trump was elected to office on a policy and a platform of tariffs, famously saying that tariff was the most beautiful word in the English language. And the president's agenda is clearly one that he obtained a mandate for at the ballot box, even if it is not a set of policies that we as New Zealanders do not buy into. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States will remain, I think, essential to New Zealand's economic prosperity, but my job is to make sure that businesses have options. And since the shock of Britain entering the European Union back in the 1970s, New Zealand's trade strategy has never really relied on just one market alone. And so we will continue to be aggressive in creating global opportunities for all of our exporters. And that's why my government has set an ambitious goal to double exports. And to help achieve that, we're expanding our FTA network with great progress, I think, over just the last 18 months. Since we brought the FTA with Europe into force early, our exports to the EU, to give you a feel for it, are up over 28%. The Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement that Todd and I went to the UAE to sign in January has cleared the way for New Zealand exporters into a $500 billion market that actually imports 90% of its food. We have concluded FTA negotiations now with the Gulf Cooperation Council, and when that agreement enters into force, New Zealand will join a very small number of countries and will be the first major agricultural exporter with preferential access into the GCC market. Plus, we're getting closer and closer, as you'll be aware, in concluding our FTA with India, a negotiation that I launched when I visited in March, and I'm determined we conclude in this parliamentary term, and Todd's working incredibly hard, and we'll be back there again next week. So it is in the New Zealand DNA, frankly, to be very externally oriented, and I want to encourage us to continue to do that and to stick by the rules. And that's why we haven't also given up on the global trade order either. Yes, we agree with the US that the WTO is not perfect, and that is why we're prepared to work with others on its reform, and it does need reform. We're not alone, I think, in our staunch commitment to predictable trade underpinned by globally agreed rules. And that's why at our initiative, the CPTPP trade ministers met with their counterparts from the EU and those from ASEAN in Melbourne last month to discuss what more we can do collectively to reaffirm and buttress the rules-based trading system. Promises made, promises kept. I think by delivering more trade, we create more jobs. More trade means higher wages, and more trade means more opportunity, obviously, for every single New Zealander. So in closing, I just want you to know that this government is laser focused on building out the relationship with the US. It represents a massive opportunity to all of us. And while I can create the conditions for the growth to occur, ultimately though, it will be the ideas and the hard work of the people in this room that will actually generate new dynamism, new growth and new prosperity. So with that, thank you for listening, and I look forward to being interviewed by Fran. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's you. Thank you, Prime Minister. I mean, one of the questions we've had from exporters is, New Zealand has basically adopted a small target policy with the United States when it comes to tariffs. Is there a point where, if there is some massive shift in tariffs again, that we would change and take a more forward-leaning approach? What's your feeling on that?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that, right from day one, we have been in there with the US administration. I was going to say right from day one, we have been in with the US administration. So I wouldn't characterise it as a small target strategy. I'd say that Todd has had very strong relationships with his counterparts. We've all spoken about our differences of opinion around not thinking tariffs is the way forward for the world, but obviously in our own bilateral relationship. So I don't want anyone to misunderstand that we're we're hiding from the issue. We actually are talking very directly about it. And I kind of have that view with all of our international relations, is that there are differences. We have strong relationships with, China, with Australia, with the US. There will be differences, and I just believe that you should be very direct and very upfront about talking about those differences, and this is one where we have done that. But we're also got to be pragmatic and practical. You may wish the world to be different, but you got to deal with the world as it is, and for us, it's I think we've found a good way through.
Yeah, I mean, just walk us through the game plan that you've actually operated in Washington with Congress, with officials, with key people in the administration, and how you balance our interests, given that there will be a change sometime in the future.
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good question. Having lived there for 8 years, the US is just an incredibly dynamic place. It's just a massive engine, as Warren Buffett would say. You wouldn't bet against the US because it will reinvent itself, it will re-innovate, and always propel forward. And I just felt coming into the job as a new Prime Minister that we needed much broader, much deeper relationships. So actually before the last election, we spent a lot of time in Washington. I think you were on that trip. We were doing 25 meetings a day, Todd and I, as we actually met with both sides of the House, and Senate and Congress. And obviously we want to build relationships with both parties, but also at the federal level, but also at the state level. So we've had quite a lot of focus also on some of the subnational level of, governors of Colorado around space. Spencer Cox, Governor of Utah, I spent some time with recently when he came out to New Zealand. Obviously Gavin Newsom in California as well. So we know that it's a big system. It's 340 million people. It's a very diverse country inside it, and you sort of have to be able to build rapport and relationship, I think. And as I've said to our team, I want to have 15 people that I can pick up the phone to and talk to in this relationship, not just, obviously the relationship between President and Prime Minister is important, but having others to talk to and engage with is really critical too.
I'll just walk us through the meeting with Governor Cox, because he was very interested in geothermal, renewable energy, deals with us.
It's interesting because, if you look at a state like Utah, it's a bit smaller than New Zealand, probably about 3.5 million people. It's got 86,000 US GDP per capita. We run at about 47,000 US GDP per capita, so it's wealthier than New Zealand per person. But essentially we were talking about work we would do, could cooperate together around, critical minerals, but actually also about space and defence as well. It's interesting, Judith's built a good relationship with Governor Jared Polis from Colorado. And obviously I think we're the 6th biggest FDI investor into the state of Colorado, because a lot of our startups have been going into Denver, as you know. So, and then obviously before the election, I'd spent a good amount of time with Gavin Newsom, 2 or 3 hours, and talking about California. And the reason is, well, if California, its own country, it's the 5th biggest economy in the world, or 6th biggest economy in the world. So, it's a big system, and I just sometimes feel you just can't. Yes, the leader-to-leader relationship's absolutely critical, and we continue to build that out too. But it's we need to have a lot of broad relationship across the system.
Do you see the Trade Minister and others taking missions at subnational level?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're up for all of that. I think the exciting thing about the US, when you look at it from a New Zealand perspective, and it's how I used to think about it in my business career as well, was that you've got 340 million people, you've got a very sophisticated set of consumers, you've got large distribution channels, and you've got really big consumer niches. And so you don't need much to make it actually work. And I felt when I was at Air New Zealand and we went through the GFC, or coming out of that GFC, that actually you can find recession-proof consumers through the whole period, because there's always people who want to come down to New Zealand, for example, in a tourism experience. They're happy to pay $6,500 per person to do a walk through Milford Sound, and it doesn't matter what's going on inside the US macro economy. There's always these seams of gold of consumers that can actually, you can actually inoculate yourself against. It's the benefit of the small country model, business model that we've got. And the agility of our own exporters, as we've observed, as we've created optionality for them to bounce around, but also to understand the US consumer and tailor their products and offering. Nathan's here from Zespri. I mean, these guys launched into the US essentially when the tariffs were announced the other day. in early April, and they've done an exceptional job because they know their product really well, they know their channels well, they know their margins well, and they know how they tailor their products to the consumers. And same with what we've seen with the red meat sector. I think in America's done an exceptional job as well. But the agility and the literacy of understanding the market, I think, has got much better. And I think the agility to bounce around between markets is good too.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the new playbook, on that, is there anything in that playbook that you think you would like to emulate here?
In the playbook of?
Yeah, of President Trump.
Well, different when you run a parliamentary system versus a presidential system. There are moments when you think one might be better than the other, but that's for another day. But look, I mean, I think what we are connected on, or what we unified around, is that we actually want to see and prioritise economic growth. It's been a very, very difficult time for the population of the world, frankly. Coming through COVID, a huge amount of dislocation coming through that. Massive dislocation coming through recessions and high inflationary environments. And I think also dislocation coming with respect to technology as well. And those three things, I think, are things that have been contributing to a more frustrated public all around the world, frankly. Yeah. And those are the things that I think as governments that we can join up on and work together on.
Yeah, I mean, did you talk about any of that when you met with the president?
Well, I don't talk about what I talk about with the leaders.
Well, how did you approach the president? Can we put it that way?
Yeah, I mean, having lived in the US for 8 years and knowing some people that he knew as well, and we could talk to about that was helpful. But we'd had a very good conversation, frankly, when he was president-elect, probably for 20 minutes, half an hour, and it's finding the area of common ground. I think with all the leaders is my job, is to find the way to. We have a fundamental difference with the US on tariffs, right? Honestly, I think that movie ends bad. I just don't think it's good for the world. We've learnt that tariffs isn't the way forward, right? And we've managed it in a bilateral sense where we can still grow our exports 8%. But what I've been more worried about is the second and third order implications of that on global trade policy. So you can have that difference, right? And you can articulate it. And if you've got a good relationship and good rapport, it's not personal. You're just saying, look, I just disagree, and actually we actually have a different approach on that. But then you've also got to just be constantly looking for the area of common ground. And we have huge amounts of common ground with the US. And it's a really big, it's not a monolithic, homogenous place. It's a really interesting, diverse place. I was in the Midwest for 6 years in Chicago. You go down to the south, you go down to the southeast, you can go, it's just such, as you guys will know from business, it's a very dynamic place. So for us, it's about we got to go front forward, Brendan McCullum style, get out on the front foot and smack it and get into it, because it's just a massive world of opportunity, and you got to get there, you got to get into it and really see what's going on.
How much prep did you do for your 10 minutes? Because I know you consulted quite a lot when you met Modi, and you had a lot more time, but
Not a lot, to be honest, because I sort of feel like intuitively I understand the US, having been in there for 8 years. So I sort of feel comfortable operating in the US and engaging with Americans. That's sort of, it was a great time of my life to be able to live there with my family and work there, and I really enjoyed it and understood it, and I got a lot out of the whole experience. So, for me, context, it was much easier probably than some others,
Naming?
No, what I mean by that is just, it was I mean, I'm very fortunate because having been overseas for 16 years and spent a lot of my time in all parts of the world and having visited most countries and done business there, it's actually quite a help sort of when you get into this job now, sort of you do understand these markets. I know them, I've visited them, so it was much easier.
Well, Consulting AI, which I've been doing quite a lot of recently, says Trump values people who are authentic and also energetic and leaders with presence. So you kind of got that impression when he complimented you on the way out that things have gone pretty well.
Yeah, no, honestly, we had a really good, first, one-on-one, and it was lovely actually because it was just ourselves, and I think we each had one official in the room, and that was it. So it was very, it's good to build that relationship, build that rapport, and then we had a very good dinner where we talked about issues across the region with 6 other leaders. Of course, it was the night before his meeting with Xi, and he'd come through ASEAN, obviously got a bit involved with Cambodia and Thailand and that conflict. and then into a visit into Japan and into Korea for APEC. And it's just important, right? I mean, we've got to get share of mind when you're a small country, and same with you with businesses that are relatively small in the US context. How do you get share of mind? And a lot of it comes back to strong relationships. Then you talk about the possibilities of what you can do together, and then you get results and outcomes for people.
Yeah, so how are you navigating between China and US? How are you balancing it?
For us, as I've said before on our China position, also really important relationship, long-standing relationship, 50 years. The frame by which I've been very clear with President Xi and Premier Li and Chairman Zhao about has been, we have huge areas of cooperation in that relationship still to explore and to build out on. But we also need to acknowledge we have differences, and where we have differences, we will raise them predictably, publicly, privately, consistently. And that's no different from actually how we do it. The same way we're managing, for example, tariffs, where we have a difference with the US. We continue to raise that and put voice to that. But, we want to build out, New Zealand is a place where 1 in 4 of our jobs are tied to trade. And it is absolutely critical that we have good relationships with as many countries as we possibly can. And yes, we have our security and defence ties are very close with the US, obviously. We have huge economic opportunity there, and we've got strong people-to-people connections. So they're the platforms by which we can grow that relationship.
Now, Prime Minister, just reflecting on New Zealand's experience during the Trump eras, I guess, what's the single most important lesson for our country in managing relationships with the world's major powers?
I think it's about, I think it is actually the issue we've just been talking about. Like, you've got to be able to raise your differences, but you've actually got to lead with the areas of cooperation and then raise your differences. And I think that mode is how we deal with personal relationships, but it's how we should deal with those relationships that are top to top. And I think the other thing is, I think there might have been some naivety in the past, but in a very diverse place, in a large place like the US, you generally have to much more broaden out those relationships and deepen them. And I just think we're getting better at that as well. And that's happening actually in our other major relationships as well. If I think about, the connections we now have with the Australian administration, we are very wide and broad now with our relationships with other ministers and even state leaders and premiers as well. That's all been very good stuff.
Finally, what advice would you have for New Zealand business and policy leaders for navigating uncertainty, but also seizing opportunity?
Yeah, well, the great thing about American business life is no one really worries about the government at some level. They just get on with it. They want to go build kick-ass companies, and that's exactly what we want to see in New Zealand as well, which is get on with it, build out a great customer proposition, build out awesome culture, and deliver superior commercial returns. And so I can tell you, as a business person operating and leading a company in the US, and a US company, I didn't give a lot of consideration as to what was happening in the state of Illinois or New York or central federal government. At a macro level, yes, thematically, but my job was to get on and build a great company. And I just think, irrespective of politics and what's happening in the geostrategic environment for New Zealand companies, there is just so much opportunity. There are massive seams of gold in the US market, and what you have to get really good at is understanding channels and customer niches and margin structures to unlock that gold and get it out of the US and put it in your pocket and bring it home. So it's pretty exciting as my outtake of it all. I mean, as a business person or an entrepreneur, setting off from New Zealand, I think it's just an exciting world out there because there's just so much opportunity, right? It's just so much opportunity if you're prepared to get in market and learn the consumer and learn the channels. That's the way to go, I think.
Thank you, and I invite you all to take inspiration from the Prime Minister's comments and to get out there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure.
Thanks.
I know. Yeah.